Hello, so this is Dr. Anthony Isacco again for the fourth video in this series focused on mental health and COVID-19. Video one was focused on the mental health concerns that are prevalent during COVID-19, and I talked a bit in depth about grief in particular. Video two was on resilience and coping during COVID-19, with the message being that despite the concerns and challenges, we can bounce back, rise above, and thrive during this challenging time. Video three was an identification and categorization of various resources that are available to you to help you cope and thrive during this time. Went through websites, videos, books, and apps that are all relevant and can be of great support during this challenging time. So this fourth video then wraps up with a specific discussion of telepsychology, which I had alluded to in the other videos, and so here we are at that point in time to now delve into telepsychology. So what is telepsychology? Telepsychology is basically the provision of psychological services, such as counseling, through the use of technology. So for example, instead of seeing someone in person for an appointment or for a meeting, you are seeing those through the use of technology. That could be over the phone, and what's more commonly being discussed at this point in time is counseling through video-based platforms such as Zoom, Doxy.me, and several others. And so over the last 6 months or so, basically since March, you've just seen an exponential rise in the use of telecounseling, particularly through video-based platforms in response to the pandemic. Basically, in-person meetings were considered to be dangerous. There were stay-at-home orders in place. But as was mentioned in video one, there was plenty of mental health concerns that needed to be addressed. And so the mental health concern didn't go away when the ability to meet in person went away. And so telecounseling was a natural and needed adaptation in order to provide those mental health services to people during this very, very difficult, challenging time that the pandemic presented to us. A lot of people thought, well, this is all new. Telecounseling, telepsychology is all new, but it's actually been around since the 1960s and has been researched during that time. And it was the primary thrust of its use and research in its inception was that it was intended to treat hard-to-reach populations. And the VA, the Veterans Affairs Department, was actually on the vanguard of its use because you basically had a lot of veterans who'd served in a military conflict and for various reasons were unable to access traditional in-person mental health services. Perhaps they were injured and couldn't get to a mental health clinic easily. Perhaps they lived out in a rural area and the closest mental health clinic was an hour plus drive from them. And so the VA kind of led the charge in terms of how can we better help veterans access mental health services, and that's was one of the main catalysts for the use and development of telepsychology. So you basically have now in the past 6 months a widespread application and generalization of the use of telepsychology to all kinds of clients and patients and different modalities. So I've personally worked with adults over televideo conferencing. I have colleagues who have worked with children, um, geriatric populations, individual counseling, group counseling, assessments, all have been able to successfully transition from in-person to virtual or through technology over the last few months. And so I believe, and others believe, that telepsychology is here to stay. It's not something that's going to go away after the pandemic. So just increasing your awareness and knowledge and understanding of it might be helpful for you now, but also in the future. So there are some barriers to in-person counseling, despite the fact that it was kind of the way we did business for such a long time, the primary way that we did business. There's a lot of stigma attached to in-person counseling. People did not want to be seen in a waiting room or walking in and out of a mental health counselor's office, so they would avoid it. Transportation to an office, we assume that people just have a car and can drive and park and then come into our office, but some people have difficulties with that. There's barriers to their transportation. If they don't have a car, and if the office is not located on a public transportation line of some sort, then it's very difficult for that person to get to in-person counseling. Access to care is very important. Who's available in their area and accepting clients is a pressing question. And so again, if you're in a rural area or even some suburban or urban areas, just access to good mental health counselors might be impeded. The financial aspect of it, depending on health insurance or ability to pay with out of pocket, it can be expensive to go seek mental health counseling. And so not to mention, the kind of indirect costs associated with transportation, or the other point here, childcare. If you're a parent that needs to go to a counselor, what do you do with your child during that time? Is that an additional cost or a barrier? And then something as like parking can be a barrier. Driving, getting there, parking is also a barrier. So all those things, I think, are forgotten whenever it's just the primary way of doing business is to just be in person. But these are very real barriers, and actually stopped a lot of people from seeking and utilizing in-person counseling in the past and currently. So telecounseling addresses some of those barriers. You're able to access a counselor from your home, so you don't have to worry about transportation. You don't need to worry about parking. Perhaps if you have a child, you can allow them to play with an older sibling or watch a movie of some sort while you are able to engage in counseling during that 45 or 50 minutes. So telecounseling has been able to adapt to the times and decrease some of those barriers to in-person counseling. And thank goodness, because as I mentioned, the mental health concerns didn't go away when in-person counseling was taken away as a result of the pandemic. But even so, telecounseling has some important considerations that you need to keep in mind. First of all, you need technology to engage in telecounseling. And so here, this slide particularly deals with the video-based platforms. You need a stable, secure internet service. You need a reliable computer or electronic device with a webcam. You can need a private, quiet, confidential space to engage in counseling. You need to remove all other distractions. So put away your phone, minimize your work calendar and your email accounts. And you need to be able to, you can't be multitasking while you engage in telecounseling. The private confidential space is part of the ethics of this all. You want to be able to speak freely without anybody other than your counselor hearing what you have to say. And because you're not in person and there's a geographic distance with your counselor, there should be a safety plan put into place just in case the severity of symptoms increases, and the patient needs to be able to have more immediate care. And so the safety plan usually entails um, knowledge of the nearest emergency room, a contact information for someone who can help in those circumstances, who's nearby the person. And so that should all be set up before the transition to telecounseling, and should be discussed and widely agreed upon, the plan between the counselor and the patient. And then the last bullet point is, technology is great until it doesn't work, right? We've all experienced moments of frustration where our video feed froze or our internet service dropped. And so it's important to stay patient with those technological challenges, and kind of roll with those challenges. So telecounseling is great, but there's certain circumstances or safeguards and considerations that you have to take into account in order to really maximize its effectiveness. And that's really what research says about the topic. Move my video box over so you can see. Research on telecounseling has shown that it can be just as effective as in-person counseling. I think people might doubt the effectiveness of telecounseling, including counselors themselves. But if you look at several research studies with children, adolescents, adults struggling with various psychological concerns, PTSD, depression, anxiety, substance use, adjustment issues, eating disorders, just to name a few, that studies have shown that telecounseling can be just as effective as in-person counseling. And with the added benefit that it can improve access and retention, so overcoming some of those barriers that I mentioned, and it increases the convenience factor. I don't know how many times over the last few months people have told me in my practice, boy, this is just way more convenient than meeting you in person. I can just walk down the steps into my home office and meet with you, rather than get dressed, get in the car, drive, see you, park, et cetera, et cetera. So, that's kind of the cherry on top of the sundae, so to speak, that it decreases the barriers and increases convenience. So the next task then, if you want to engage in telecounseling, is to find a good counselor. And so there's various ways that you can find a good counselor, and here I list some of the more common ways. Number one is just word of mouth. So there's no better advertisement for a good counselor than someone else recommending them. And so if you have a trusted friend, family member, a priest who knows good counselors, or has been to a good counselor themselves, getting a recommendation from them is very meaningful and can be very helpful. I then list 3 search directories that can help you. The first one, Psychology Today, is a very broadband search directory. You can go there and have multiple important and relevant search criteria that can help you identify a counselor. You can search by geographic region, health insurance, or the particular problem that you're experiencing, or the particular type of counseling that you're looking for. If you're looking for a Catholic counselor in particular, then these 2 websites have directories for Catholic mental health professionals. And so you can go to both of those websites. There is some overlap between the 2, but they are distinct enough that I list them there. catholicpsychotherapy.org/directory and www.catholictherapist.com. Both allow you to search in your region for a Catholic mental health professional if you really want the faith and mental health integration. Some things to be aware of whenever you are calling a counselor during this time. I think the big thing to be aware of is that Several counselors are operating on a wait list right now. They are just booked. I've heard from many colleagues who operate private practices or in group practices that these last few months have been the busiest they've ever been in their entire career. So you might have to leave a message. You might have to call multiple referrals because they're just so full right now because the demand is so high. I think the good news or the silver lining in all this is people are seeking help during this challenging time. And so keep that in mind. Whenever you talk with a counselor, you want to clarify how you're going to pay for the service. You know, you want to make sure if you're paying with your health benefits, you want to make sure that they accept your health insurance. And if you are paying out of pocket or through other means, you want to make sure that you and them agree upon how much and the source of payment. You can always clarify with them if they are offering in-person or telecounseling services. And one of the questions that you can ask if you're not sure whenever you talk with them and if it's important to you is just what role of faith is part of their practice. So that's all part of the opening conversation. The other thing that you can that will help you whenever you search for a counselor is just understanding the different terms and professions and licensure. There's kind of three main or four main types of helping professions in the mental health realm. There's a psychiatrist. That is a professional with a medical degree, and they primarily prescribe psychiatric medication. Some do talk therapy, but most are primarily focused on medication and medication management. There's a psychologist. This is someone with a doctorate degree in psychology and provides counseling, assessment, and consultation services. And there is a professional counselor. This is someone with a master's degree in mental health counseling psychology. They provide primarily counseling and consultation. And then there's also licensed clinical social workers who get the social work degree but do additional training in order to provide talk therapy. The key, I think, in understanding all four of those professions is going to someone who's reputable and has a license. So I refer people to all four of those types of professions, but I only refer to people who are licensed because that is kind of, I think, a critical kind of credential to have in the helping field. So in summary, as I look at all four of the videos, I just conclude that COVID-19 has contributed to plenty of mental health concerns, but the story does not end there. We can be creative with fostering safe, physically distant relationships. We can practice self-care in many ways. We can develop coping and resilience during this time, and we could take advantage of lots of resources that are available to us along the way. So we have plenty of help despite the concerns and challenges. So I want to thank you for watching this video series. If you have any questions or feedback for me, please don't hesitate to contact me, and I list my email addresses there.